No one in the Hellier Rift expected a human to change the fate of an empire with a single act of kindness. Least of all the empire itself. The archives would later record it as a political catastrophe, a biological anomaly, and a strategic failure beyond calculation. But in that moment, it began with something painfully small. A coat. A freezing room. And a human who refused to look away. The Zephyrian Imperium ruled through precision. Every corridor, every climate field, every breath of recycled air was tuned to their physiology. Cold sharpened their minds. Cold enforced obedience. Cold reminded everyone who was in control. Humans, captured during the border collapse of Vega 9, were not designed for this environment. That was the point. Elias Crow sat alone in a containment chamber carved from black crystal alloy. The temperature hovered just above lethal for a human, low enough to numb fingers and slow thoughts. His breath came out in thin white clouds. The gravity plate beneath him hummed, but he ignored it, sitting cross-legged on the floor instead. He had learned long ago that Zephyrian systems hated improvisation. And humans lived on it. He rubbed his hands together and listened. The chamber had a sound. A faint clicking inside the wall panels, irregular and wrong. Machines always told the truth if you listened carefully enough. Across the transparent barrier, Empress Naira Varel of the Zephyrian Imperium stood perfectly still. She was taller than any human, her body slender and sharp-lined, skin like pale frost glass threaded with slow-moving light. Her eyes, large and faceted, reflected data streams only she could see. She wore ceremonial armor woven from climate filaments, but even those failed to hide the subtle tremor in her limbs. Naira was cold. That should have been impossible. The chamber temperature was ideal for her species. But the Imperium had been under siege for weeks. Endless council sessions. Constant strategic recalculations. Power drain across the spires. Even an Empress had limits. She watched the human with analytical focus. Subject E317. One soldier. One survivor. No genetic enhancements. No psionic markers. Statistically irrelevant. And yet, for reasons she could not model, he unsettled her. Elias looked up and met her gaze through the barrier. "You're shaking," he said. The translator relayed it instantly. Naira stiffened. "I am not," she replied. "My motor systems are functioning within acceptable deviation." Elias tilted his head slightly, studying her the way a mechanic studied an engine. Not with fear. Not with submission. With concern. "Acceptable for you," he said. "Not for someone running an empire." Silence followed. No one spoke to the Empress like that. Not generals. Not scientists. Certainly not prisoners. Naira stepped closer to the barrier. "You will address me with—" "You're losing heat," Elias interrupted gently. "Your light patterns are slowing. That's not ceremonial fatigue. That's metabolic strain." Her minds raced. He was right. The data confirmed it. The human should not have been able to read her physiology so easily. "How would you know?" she demanded. He shrugged, the movement stiff in the cold. "Humans are good at noticing when someone's about to collapse. We've had a lot of practice." Naira hesitated. Then, against every protocol etched into her rule, she deactivated the containment barrier. The air shifted instantly. Warmer near Elias. Colder near her. The difference was dramatic. She felt it like a blade against her skin. He stood slowly, careful not to appear threatening. Up close, he looked fragile. Too thin. Bruised. Wrapped in a heavy, worn thermal coat marked with human military patches. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "This room is killing you." "I am Zephyrian," Naira said. "Cold does not kill us." "Maybe not," Elias replied. "But it's winning." Her vision flickered. Just for a fraction of a second. Enough to register danger. Before she could react, Elias reached up and unfastened his coat. Naira's heart jolted. "What are you doing?" she snapped. He didn't answer. He stepped forward, closing the distance that no human was ever allowed to cross. The heat radiating from him was shocking. Wasteful. Inefficient. And desperately alive. He draped the coat over her shoulders. The effect was immediate. The fabric trapped warmth like a living thing. His warmth. Her systems surged, light patterns brightening as her metabolism stabilized. The cold retreated, confused. Naira froze, mind reeling. "You dare," she began. "You need it more than I do," Elias said. His teeth chattered now. "And if you fall apart, everyone falls apart. Including me." She stared at him. No fear. No calculation. Just a simple truth delivered without expectation of reward. No one had ever given her anything. Alarms flared silently in her neural overlay. Social anomaly. Behavioral breach. Emotional response detected. Her species did not respond emotionally under stress. And yet, something unfamiliar tightened in her chest. "You have committed an irreversible act," Naira said softly. Elias smiled faintly. "Yeah. Humans do that a lot." Security fields snapped into place around the chamber. Not to restrain Elias. To seal him inside. Naira stepped back, the coat still around her shoulders. The warmth felt wrong. Dangerous. Necessary. "You cannot leave," she said, voice steady but eyes burning. "The council will demand explanation. And you are now involved." Elias's smile faded as the exits locked. "Trapped, her," he said. "Guess the coat wasn't free after all." Naira turned away, already issuing commands that would shake the Imperium. The human had saved her life. Now she would make sure he never escaped it. The doors of the containment chamber sealed with a sound that echoed far longer than it should have. Elias felt it in his bones. Not the fear, he had learned to live with that, but the finality. Whatever he had just stepped into, there was no stepping back out. Outside the chamber, Empress Naira Varel walked through the upper spire corridors of the Zephyrian Imperium wearing a human coat. That single fact sent ripples of disbelief through every sensor, every guard, every silent observer embedded in the walls. Zephyrians did not wear foreign objects. Especially not those saturated with alien heat signatures. Especially not those marked with the insignia of a conquered species. The coat marked her. And worse, it warmed her. Naira could still feel it. The trapped heat pressed gently against her skin, steady and alive, like a second heartbeat not her own. It interfered with her focus. With her clarity. With her certainty. She hated that it helped. Behind her, advisors scrambled to keep pace, their crystalline forms shimmering with agitation. "Sovereign," one finally said, unable to contain itself, "the council is convened. They have detected the anomaly." "I am aware," Naira replied. Her voice was calm, but her thoughts were not. Every system report confirmed the same thing. Her vital metrics had stabilized the moment the human's coat touched her. No medicine. No technology. Just warmth. That was unacceptable. Back in the chamber, Elias paced slowly, forcing blood back into his fingers. The cold clawed at him harder now. Without the coat, the room felt openly hostile, like the walls were offended by his presence. "So this is how it ends," he muttered to himself. "Freeze to death after committing interstellar manners violation." He knelt by the wall panel again, prying it open with a thin strip of metal he'd snapped from his bunk. The clicking noise was louder now. A misaligned regulator. A bad design choice. Aliens always underestimated entropy. High above, the Zephyrian High Council assembled in a ring of floating platforms, each occupied by a sovereign mind that had never known true defeat. Naira stood at the center. "You have compromised protocol," one voice resonated. "You allowed a human to touch you." "He gave you an object," another added. "A contaminant." Naira met their gazes without flinching. He prevented systemic failure. The council stilled. "That is not possible," a third voice said. "Humans are inferior. Emotion-driven. Predictable." "Then explain why my metabolic collapse halted the moment he intervened," Naira replied. "Explain why your models failed." Silence followed. Data flowed. Recalculations spiked. Naira pressed on. You built this empire on certainty, on the belief that all variables can be known. But humans are not variables. They are disruptors. The word tasted dangerous. And what do you propose? The council demanded. Naira's grip tightened slightly on the coat. We study him. Closely. Back in the chamber, Elias finally realigned the regulator. The clicking stopped. Warmth surged faintly from the wall vent. There you go, he whispered. You just needed a little kindness too. The lights dimmed. A voice filled the chamber, not Naira's. Deeper. Colder. Human Elias Crow. You are hereby reassigned. The floor beneath him dissolved into light. He fell. Not down, but sideways. When the world reassembled, Elias stood in a vast chamber unlike anything he had seen. No containment fields. No restraints. Just open space and a single figure waiting for him. Naira. She looked different. Without the council watching, without the ceremonial projections, she seemed smaller. Tired. Still wrapped in his coat. You should give that back, Elias said hoarsely. I'm starting to miss it. She almost smiled. Almost. You have been classified as a strategic asset, Naira said. That is why you are trapped. Elias frowned. I was hoping for something romantic. Or at least stupid. Naira stepped closer. You gave without leverage. Without demand. That breaks every known rule of power. Yeah, he said. Humans do that sometimes. Her eyes studied him intensely. Why? He hesitated. Then answered honestly. Because if we don't, we lose who we are. The words struck deeper than any weapon. Naira turned away, staring out at the stars beyond the spire window. The Imperium has ruled for 1,000 cycles, she said. We have never needed mercy. Elias joined her, careful to keep distance. Maybe that's why you're freezing. Alarms erupted across the spire. Incoming transmission, an automated voice announced. XYRR collective fleet entering contested space. Naira's posture snapped into command readiness. The XYRR were ancient rivals. Ruthless. Adaptive. And far less restrained than the Zephyrians. They will sense weakness, Naira said. They always do. Elias watched the tactical projections bloom across the chamber. Perfect formations. Perfect responses. Perfectly predictable. They're going to hit your energy cores, he said suddenly. Naira looked at him sharply. How would you know? Because that's what I do, Elias replied. You run cold. You run precise. You don't expect anyone to be stupid enough to aim for the messy parts. Naira hesitated. For the first time in her reign, she altered a battle plan based on a human instinct. That decision would save her empire. And bind Elias Crow to her fate completely. Far below, the Imperium prepared for war. And one human, shivering but unbroken, smiled faintly. Guess I'm not leaving anytime soon, he said. The first shots of the XYR assault never reached the Zephyrian capital. They vanished into space, swallowed by defensive fields that had been tuned 1,000 times before. Perfect shields. Perfect angles. Perfect mathematics. The High Council watched with confidence as projections showed the enemy fleet breaking formation, exactly as predicted. Exactly as always. Elias Crow stood at the edge of the command chamber, arms wrapped tightly around himself, trying to ignore the cold biting into his bones. He wasn't supposed to be here. Humans weren't allowed in strategic rooms. But Naira had overruled the protocols, and no one had dared question her directly. Not while she wore the human's coat. The XYRR will adapt within 3 cycles, Naira said, eyes fixed on the star map. They always do. Yeah, Elias replied. That's the problem. Several councillors turned sharply toward him. Explain, one demanded. Elias hesitated. He was no admiral. No grand strategist. Just a soldier who had survived long enough to learn one hard lesson. Your enemy thinks like you, he said slowly. They expect logic, patterns, clean moves. So they'll counter your counters. Naira glanced at him. And humans? We don't, Elias said. Not when we're desperate. The projections flickered. New data streamed in. XYRR ships were changing vectors, sacrificing outer vessels to expose gaps in the shield harmonics. The council stirred. They are burning ships to create noise, one voice said. Inefficient. Elias shook his head. It's bait. Too late. A surge of chaotic energy slammed into the Imperium's outer lattice. Not powerful enough to break it, but wrong enough to confuse it. Defensive systems hesitated, recalculating. That hesitation cost them. Alarms screamed as XYR strike craft poured through a momentary opening, fast and ugly and completely unaligned with any known combat doctrine. Naira's hands clenched. They are exploiting uncertainty. They're exploiting pride, Elias said. You assumed no one would fight like this. The council erupted into overlapping commands. Override requests. Emergency subroutines. Too many minds pulling in too many directions. Naira raised one hand. Silence fell. She turned to Elias. What would humans do? Every eye focused on him. He swallowed. This was madness. But so was everything else about this empire. We'd break our own rules, he said. Right now. Naira's eyes burned. Be specific. Elias took a breath. Shut down part of your shield. On purpose. The chamber froze. That would expose the core spires, a counselor snapped. Unacceptable risk. Elias met their gaze. You're already exposed. You just don't know it yet. Naira searched his face, reading not fear, but conviction. The kind forged in loss. Which sector? She asked. Elias pointed. There. Where it looks stupid. The council protested. Naira ignored them. Do it, she commanded. A section of the Imperium's shield dimmed. The XYRR reacted instantly, surging toward the apparent weakness with predatory focus. Their fleet compressed, hungry and confident. Now what? Naira asked. Elias smiled faintly. Now we do something human. Deep within the spire, systems long considered useless came online. Cargo launch rails. Civilian mass drivers. Old mining equipment never meant for war. The XYRR fleet slammed into a storm of debris. Not clean projectiles. Not elegant weapons. Just thousands of irregular chunks of alloy, ice, and abandoned machinery hurled at unpredictable speeds. Chaos exploded across space. XYRR ships collided. Sensors overloaded. Formation discipline collapsed. They cannot model this, a counselor whispered. Naira felt something unfamiliar rise within her. Not certainty. Not control. Hope. The Imperium counterattacked, not with precision, but with overwhelming confusion. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't efficient. It worked. Within minutes, the XYRR fleet began to withdraw, damaged and disoriented. The capital spire held. The chamber erupted into stunned silence. Naira slowly turned to Elias. You have saved this empire. He shrugged weakly. Don't thank me yet. They'll be back. They always are, she said. Medical drones finally moved toward Elias, scanning his failing body temperature. He was past shivering now. That was worse. Naira noticed. Without a word, she removed the coat from her shoulders and placed it back around him. The room stiffened. You cannot, a counselor began. Naira silenced them with a look. The human freezes without it. I do not. Elias laughed softly as warmth returned. You sure about that? Naira didn't answer. Later, as emergency repairs echoed through the spire, Naira stood alone with Elias near the observation window. The stars looked calmer now. Deceptively so. The council wants to dissect you, she said quietly. Not physically. Strategically. They want your mind. Elias leaned against the glass. Figures. They believe you are a weapon. He shook his head. I'm not. Naira studied him. That may be the most dangerous thing of all. She hesitated, then spoke words no Zephyrian ruler had ever spoken to an outsider. I need you. Elias met her gaze. Careful. That's how humans pack bond. Naira didn't understand the term fully, but something about it made her chest tighten again. You are not a prisoner, she said. But you cannot leave. Elias nodded slowly. Trapped by gratitude. That's new. No, Naira corrected. Trapped by choice. Far across the stars, the XYR collective regrouped, analyzing their failure with cold fury. They would return stronger. And when they did, they would face something no empire had ever truly faced before. A united front. An alien ruler learning mercy. And a human who refused to stop being human. The Imperium did not sleep after the battle. Lights burned across the spires. Repair drones swarmed like silver insects. Data streams flooded every channel as the High Council argued, recalculated, and quietly panicked. Victory had come, yes, but not through Zephyrian superiority. It had come through human chaos. That frightened them more than defeat ever could. Elias Crow felt it immediately. Where before there had been cold curiosity, now there was focus. Intent. Guards appeared where none had stood before. Doors took longer to open. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. He was no longer just trapped. He was contained. Naira sensed it too. She felt the tension coil through her empire like a tightening wire. The council had accepted Elias's usefulness, but usefulness was temporary. Control was eternal. They would not tolerate a variable forever. Elias sat in a small observation chamber overlooking the industrial rings of the capital. The coat rested on his shoulders, heavier now with meaning than warmth. He watched ships being rebuilt from wreckage, civilian craft turned into weapons, broken tools reforged into defenses. Human ideas spreading through alien hands. Naira entered without ceremony. They are planning to isolate you, she said quietly. To remove you from influence. Elias didn't look surprised. Figures. I don't fit the furniture. They believe your presence destabilizes decision-making, she continued. They are not entirely wrong. Elias smiled faintly. I warned you about pack bonding. Naira studied him. Explain it again. He sighed. Humans connect. Fast. Deep. We survive by turning strangers into family. Allies into something closer. It makes us irrational. It also makes us hard to break. Naira looked away toward the stars. The council believes this is a weakness. It is, Elias said. Sometimes. But it's also why we don't give up. Silence stretched between them. They want me to give the coat back, Naira said at last. Elias glanced at her. Do you want to? Her answer came without hesitation. No. That single word sealed both their fates. The XYRR collective did not waste time repeating mistakes. Their second move was quieter. Smarter. No fleet. No grand assault. Just whispers. False signals crept into Zephyrian networks. Fabricated human transmissions. Carefully edited images showing Elias issuing commands, manipulating systems, placing himself at the center of power. The implication was clear. The human was taking control. The council reacted exactly as the XYRR predicted. Elias was summoned to the High Convergence Chamber under armed escort. The vast ring of sovereign minds loomed above him, their light patterns sharp with accusation. You have exceeded your role, one voice declared. Your influence grows unchecked. Elias looked up, calm despite the weapons trained on him. I haven't ordered anyone to do anything. That is irrelevant, another replied. Your presence alters outcomes. Naira stood among them, rigid, silent. They turned to her. Sovereign Naira Varel, the council intoned. You will surrender the human for containment. This instability ends now. Elias finally looked at her. Not pleading. Understanding. Naira felt something fracture inside her. The empire she had ruled through logic now demanded she betray the very act that had saved it. She stepped forward. No, she said. The chamber erupted. This defiance is unacceptable. Naira's voice cut through the chaos, steady and cold. You fear him because he cannot be modeled. Because he reminds us that control is not the same as strength. You would choose an alien over your own kind, a counselor demanded. Naira turned slowly, eyes blazing. I choose survival. She gestured, and the chamber screens ignited. Data flooded the space, XYRR infiltration patterns, predictive models showing inevitable collapse if Zephyrian rigidity continued. Every projection ended the same way. Defeat. They are adapting faster than we are, Naira said. Because they are willing to change. Because they understand something we forgot. And what is that? The council asked. Naira looked at Elias. Empires are not saved by perfection, she said. They are saved by people. The council hesitated. That hesitation was enough. XYRR strike signatures flared across the outer systems. Not an invasion. A precision strike aimed directly at the high convergence spire. They knew we'd be divided, Elias said quietly. The chamber shook as defenses activated too slowly. Naira made her decision. She grabbed Elias's arm. Run, she commanded. They didn't flee the way the council expected. Not toward shelters. Not toward escape craft. They ran downward. Into the understructure. Into forgotten maintenance tunnels and ancient industrial shafts built before the Imperium believed it could ever fall. XYRR drones breached the spire above them, slicing through council chambers with brutal efficiency. The Empire's head was being cut off. Elias and Naira reached a sealed vault deep within the core. What is this? Elias asked, breath fogging. Naira placed her palm on the door. The heart of the Imperium. The systems that hold everything together. The door opened. Inside, raw energy pulsed, climate control, gravity, life support for billions. If the XYR take this, Elias said, it's over. Naira nodded. Which is why the council never allowed anyone near it. Elias looked at her. You're thinking something dangerous. She met his gaze. You taught me that sometimes, danger is the point. Together, they began rerouting systems, not to optimize, but to confuse. Feedback loops. Redundancies stacked on redundancies. Human-style improvisation layered over alien precision. The XYRR arrived seconds later. They froze. The core made no sense. It behaved irrationally. Warm where it should be cold. Flexible where it should be rigid. Alive. This structure is compromised, a XYR voice echoed. Withdraw. Too late. The Imperium didn't just resist. It adapted. For the first time in recorded galactic history, an empire survived not by tightening control, but by letting go. When the dust settled, the XYR were gone. The High Council was shattered. And Elias Crow stood beside Empress Naira Varel, both of them changed beyond repair. You could have left, Elias said quietly. You chose to stay trapped. Naira looked at the coat still wrapped around him. No, she said. I chose to bond. Far above, a wounded empire took its first breath as something new. History rarely remembers the moment an empire changes. There is no single sound, no flash of light that marks the turning point. For the Zephyrian Imperium, it happened quietly, in the aftermath of chaos, while smoke still drifted through broken spires and emergency lights painted the halls in trembling blue. Elias Crow stood on a balcony overlooking the capital world, wrapped in the same battered coat that had started everything. Below him, millions of Zephyrians worked side by side with captured humans and allied species, rebuilding not just structures, but ideas. For the first time, the Imperium felt warm. The High Council no longer existed in its old form. Half had been lost in the XYR strike. The rest had resigned, unable to accept the transformation they themselves had allowed. In their place stood a provisional assembly, scientists, engineers, civilian leaders, and, controversially, representatives from conquered worlds, including humans. Naira Varel watched the city with him, her posture relaxed in a way that would have once been unthinkable. Her light patterns were brighter now, more fluid. Exposure to human environments had altered her biology slightly. The medics called it adaptation. Naira called it progress. "They will write stories about you," she said. "Most of them incorrect." Elias chuckled. "That's how you know you did something important." She turned to him. "You are no longer a prisoner. The Imperium has voted. You may leave." The words hung between them, heavier than chains. Elias looked out at the stars. Home was out there. Earth. Blue skies. Familiar gravity. People who would never fully understand what he had seen or what he had helped become. "And you?" he asked. "I remain," Naira said simply. "This empire still needs to learn." He nodded slowly. "Yeah. So does my species." For a long moment, neither spoke. "You could stay," Naira said. "As an advisor. As something more." Elias smiled, soft and tired. "Careful. That's how legends turn into responsibilities." She studied him. "Is that a refusal?" "No," he said. "It's a condition." He faced her fully. "If I stay, it's not because I'm trapped. It's because I choose to be here. No cages. No secrets." Naira placed her hand over her primary cardiac chamber, a deeply personal gesture among her kind. "Agreed." The announcement echoed across the Imperium that same cycle. The Zephyrian Imperium would no longer rule through conquest alone. Climate systems were adjusted for mixed species comfort. Military doctrine was rewritten to include adaptability over perfection. Emotional intelligence, once dismissed as weakness, became a field of study. And at the center of it all was a single, dangerous idea. Humans were not controlled. They were partnered. The XYRR collective watched from afar, analyzing the impossible. An empire that should have collapsed had become unpredictable. Stronger. Worse, it had become united across difference. "This is unacceptable," the XYRR Overmind concluded. Humans spread instability. They issued a galaxy-wide warning. Avoid humanity at all costs. The warning was ignored. Human traders arrived next. Then engineers. Then families. Everywhere they went, they did the same thing they always had. They bonded. They shared food. Shared stories. Shared warmth in cold places that had forgotten what warmth meant. And empires changed. Years later, a young Zephyrian asked Naira about the human coat preserved behind a transparent field in the Hall of Origins. "Is it a weapon?" the child asked. Naira smiled. "No," she said. "It is a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "That power does not come from fear," Naira replied. "It comes from choosing to care when it would be easier not to." The records would name Elias Crow many things. Strategist. Catalyst. The human variable. But among humans, the story spread differently. They said there was once a soldier who gave his coat to a freezing Empress, and in doing so, trapped an empire, not in chains, but in hope. And the stars were never the same again.